So before we get into some of the investing stuff, Hunter, I just wanted to get a little bit more on your background. You went to Vanderbilt and played for the Bears for a long time in the NFL. Anything you want to mention about how you went, why you went to Vanderbilt, and then your experience in becoming an NFL player from there?
Gosh, I think my story might be boring compared to some of the people that went before me. My final two schools were Vanderbilt and Princeton. So I actually think that my interest in venture capital and really just kind of private finance in general started in high school. And like I was thinking to myself as everybody gave their backgrounds, this is the nerdiest group of football players that you'll ever collect. But I think, it's been well documented that a lot of athletes struggle when they leave the game financially, or even just with their mental health in terms of finding their next passion. And I think that something that everybody on this call has in common is that we've all got other things that we're passionate about. And football is one of those interests, but it's not our only interest. And so you find, like, at least for me, the teammates of mine that were sort of like monolithically interested in football, and that was all they had, are the ones that now that we're a decade out of the game have struggled the most to figure out what that next passion is. And so I think the fact that I was kind of a late bloomer in the football sense has always helped me. I was not a five-star recruit. I really didn't know I was going to have a chance to play in the NFL until I was a senior. And the result of those kind of last minute opportunities presenting themselves to play in the SEC, for example, is that I was always making other plans. And, I remember at the Rookie Symposium, which is this annual event they have for every drafted rookie, they tell you to think of your entire time in the NFL as a transition period. Don't get complacent. Don't count on your fourth, fifth, sixth year of your contract actually being realized. And to a degree, that was my path to where I am today, is just that I feel like I just had sort of an 8-year detour through the NFL and never really looked at that as a career, even though it ended up becoming one in hindsight. I think you're on mute there, Zach.
Thanks, Hunter. It's a good transition. I wanted to talk about how everybody's leveraged their backgrounds in athletics, professional sports, to become more successful as a leader, business builder, investor, etc. Kelvin's our only active player, so I want to start with Kelvin and get a sense for how you got interested in this and how you're able to be so active despite being an NFL player.
I say it, and I try not to be condescending when I say it, but when I leave home and I'm done watching film, I'm not getting on a PlayStation or Xbox to play a game, which is nothing wrong with that. When I was young, I did the same thing. I got a PlayStation that is wrapped up and has been wrapped up since my time in Pittsburgh. Like that time is gone. But I think, when you ask like where the interest came from, like you realize you have so much time after you leave the facility. You come in early, you take care of your body, you practice, you finish meetings, you watch film once you get home, and then you still have, 4 to 5 hours to yourself, especially if you don't have a family. And for me, I had a lot of time when I blew my knee out in 2015 and was, had my master's already when I got into the league, but, was starting to think about how could I use this time wisely, and started going down a rabbit hole and started asking questions, started taking meetings. Instead of taking a getaway trip, to go vacation, I would take a getaway trip and take meetings at that getaway trip. If I was going to Mexico, who else could I meet in Mexico? If I was going to Australia, who else could I meet in Australia? I'm going to Africa, who else can I meet in Africa? So it's one of those things where I just started taking, every single opportunity to take time to meet somebody that was influential in their region, in their space, and, was going after, it was also a learning process, going after certain markets or going after certain things that I didn't know too much about. Who are the experts in this region while I'm here? And just really just became obsessed with my time and being efficient with my time. And I think for me, that's boded well for me. trying to impart that to some of my teammates, that's a completely different story. But some are willing to take the time to do it with me. Some are not. But I'm like I said, from the country, you can lead a horse to the water, but you can't make him drink. And I'm a firm believer of that. And as much as I can, I try to do so. And then what I also try to do is I try to find out, just like you've asked about our backgrounds, I try to find the backgrounds out about my teammates and find out where there are commonalities with my teammates and some overlap in some of the deal flow. Today I invested in a company in New York. It's a fashion-based company, which I don't do. Guys on this call know I don't do anything in the fashion arena. But, one of my teammates, Christian Kirk, is a fashion guru. Like if I was having somebody dressing me, it would be Christian Kirk. And I hit up the founder and he was like, I asked him, would he be open to just having a 10-minute conversation with Kirk? And he was like, man, I would love to. He was number 2 on my fantasy team, and I was in 5 different fantasy leagues. It's something so simple as, one guy loves fashion and I know a company in New York that's fashion oriented, and just being able to be the connective tissue to put 2 and 2 together.
I think it's so impressive that you got your master's degree right on the back of your undergrad. So you gave the commencement speech, right, for your class?
Correct. The Simmons School of Education. Yeah.
That's great. I mean, I feel like education is what opens doors, and we talk a lot these days about how to create access and opportunity and inclusion, and really, education is the best route to creating your own access. I always tell people, look, society's not going to do it for you. You just got to go out and earn it. And the best way to do that is through education. And it doesn't need to be formal education. So this is more of a message for younger folks that are watching. The degrees are nice and certifications are nice, but really most of the real learning is going to be through books and through talking to people that have done what you aspire to do. So Courtney, I want to talk a little bit about lessons that you learned from the football field that you've applied in business. I know you played hurt a lot. You almost never missed a game or any games, if I'm not mistaken. You're the captain of the team. How has that helped you in business? And why did you decide to after you got out of Chicago with your JD and MBA, what led you to venture investing?
Yeah, thanks, Zach. I was never in college and the pros. I was always undersized, and so the thing I always had to rely on was technique. And so, kind of carrying that forward into investing, I've always been a proponent of, again, getting kind of the basics and getting that under your belt and learning and practicing the basics before you kind of make the next big step, right? I remember my first investment coming out of when I was constructing my portfolio way back in 1990. It was a Bundesbond. It was a $10,000 investment in a German bond, and it was trading at it had an 8% coupon. And I literally spent hours and hours on trying to understand what bonds were, understanding the difference between treasury bills, bonds, and started constructing my portfolio there. Then I went into tech investment. I actually invested in Microsoft, which is 1 year I actually made more money in investments than I did on the field. And so it's going forward into those same lessons when coming out of football. I realized, again, like I'm a values-based investor. I don't follow fads. I don't follow kind of what's the nouveau riche on the market. We look at companies that have some defensible technology, mainly tech right now, but if they have a large first mover advantage, they have to have a substantial first mover advantage and have to have a technology that's really growing, or a space that's really growing. So those are kind of some of the things I look at. I played hurt a lot. I think the one thing that everyone on this call probably can take from their experience is, it really doesn't matter what you did the day before. It matters how you perform the next day. Your LPs are asking you questions every day. But I think one other thing I would kind of say is that being able to own up to mistakes. We've had a number of, this is venture. We've had some blowups, companies that we've invested in that are no longer around. So anyway, so hopefully you guys can still hear me. My screen's frozen. That's kind of some of the things that I've learned.
We could hear you. Thanks, Courtney. So Isaiah, how did you make the transition into VC? And also, and what lessons did you take from Harvard, playing football there, and from the NFL to your current role?
Well, I'll answer those questions. I think one of I love what Courtney just talked about and what Kelvin talked about, as well as kind of, some of the other aspects around, what Hunter talked about it as well, which is, during my time, in the NFL, I paid close attention at a very, right at my rookie year. I paid attention to the crops of people that were retiring, or as Courtney says it the correct way, we're asked no longer to play, right? It's like no one leaves on their own term unless you're, a superstar, right? Or
still a free agent, man.
Yeah, I can still come back.
I am too.
I paid close attention to those guys that there was two buckets. It's like guys that challenged themselves and guys that didn't, right? And I remember the guys that didn't challenge themselves, that became almost shells of themselves. They were like these superheroes on the field, indestructible. And then you saw that kind of, the inability to kind of realign and find new passion and, put all those things they loved about the game into something else, right? And, however that looked. So I was like, all right, I want to get ahead of that. I want to make sure I can figure out what I really like, what I didn't know what I didn't know, around that. I think that really helped, lead to a fun journey, right? Like the journey that everybody's talking about here. And I love how Courtney says it, we're all nerds at heart, but in Kelvin walked through it as well. It's like, it's fun to learn about things you never knew anything about. And you have a platform to go ask tons of questions. And no one's going to say, that's a crazy question. No one's going to say that. So there's something very empowering.
Not to your face anyway.
Yeah, exactly. Very empowering in that, because in the end, you're going to learn something every single conversation you have, right? You store that away. It's like putting money in the bank, right? You store that away. You're going to learn. You're going to learn more and more, and those feedback loops get tighter and tighter. So that was kind of the other aspects. I love what Courtney said too, really around, and I completely agree that you make a mistake, and if you think of sports as this microcosm of life, you're gonna make mistakes. It's how you respond to making mistakes, and the kind of the way in which you can kind of overcome any obstacle as well, right? Be able to kind of persevere, find a way around that. And one of the things also I think is amazing as the kind of microcosm aspect and the kind of parallel is, whether you're an entrepreneur, whether you're an investor, this ability to give credit where credit is due. And it's one of the things that I always loved about football, which is in front of your teammates, and to be called out in front of, coaches and in a very, very positive way. That was amazing, right? No one's taking credit for someone else's work around that. Your body of work is right out there. And that's one of the things I've loved to bring over to business. One of the things I really was passionate around that was, for some reason, in some parts of business, is just missing of being able to truly give credit where credit is due, both entrepreneurs, kind of across the board. I think that was kind of one of the big pieces. I will say this in my last comment, if you look at things kind of translating over, I think everyone's made amazing comments around that. I think going back to this idea of kind of perseverance, kind of in the face of immense odds, et cetera, that is the name Will Ventures is this power of human will. That's what it alludes to. And it's something that is, every single person on this call can relate to. And you kind of learn that from the ground up as an athlete, as a player, and all right, how do I take that to other aspects of life, or vice versa, right? Some of those things kind of play into each other. but that name kind of Will Ventures speaks to that. And it really speaks to then those things that translate over to the best entrepreneurs that I've been able to be around and kind of look at, which is those entrepreneurs are just able to find a way. So in the end, you get fancy on the analysis and looking at markets and addressable markets, everything else, kind of around the diligence aspects, which all that stuff is important. It's I'm not saying it's not, but in the end, to really quantify a qualitative aspect of this willingness to just find a way, and that is that kind of X factor you look at, but it's very core to kind of getting to being an athlete, playing at the highest level, and then trying to find that in other people, entrepreneurs with an amazing idea. And that's not 100% perfect, but then you really, really bet on the people. And I know that's a core a lot of people on this call can agree with as well.
Yeah, I think those are fantastic points. I mean, everybody's made great points. I love the point about willpower and perseverance, really, right? I mean, no matter whether you're an athlete or a business person or something else, being successful is all about perseverance, because it's going to be hard probably more often than it's easy. Right.
I agree. And that's why I was saying the name Will Ventures a nod to the entrepreneurs that we want to back. And just all of those things we talk about is, kind of those are the things we stand for. And we know it's not easy. We know it's really, 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 really hard to do. And by the way, we know you're not going to be perfect. And we've been there, we've done that. It's how you react when those things, those things happen, and our willingness to get in the bunker with you and figure out a way.
Mm-hmm. One of the things that I love about VC that I hear from a lot of founders as well as venture investors is that they're able to tap into a broader range of their talents. So for instance, when I was working at Deutsche Bank, we're the largest bank in the world at the time with 2.8 trillion, right, in assets. And I was a trader there. I traded bonds and I traded credit default swaps, and I did that every day. And it's like playing the same game over and over and over again. And that's great, but I felt like it didn't really tap into the other skills I had, whether it was relationship management, business building, operations, marketing, etc. And so starting my own fund and fund management firm has really enabled me to flex those muscles that were latent before. And I'm sure you guys probably, I see some heads nodding. I mean, I'm sure that's part of the reason why you guys are in the roles that you're in, because you're able to really flex your muscles in different ways. And if you're resourceful and you're smart and you're hardworking and you're connected, you will be successful, in this field. So I think it's just worth noting, though, that really it's about resourcefulness more than anything, in my opinion. Tunde, how did you decide on VC, and any comments on how you got there, and also what other folks have said?
I feel like I'm learning so much from everyone even on this call right now. For me, I was more of an entrepreneur at first. I was interested in tech, interested in computers, kind of like Kelvin. I think when and even Courtney too, when you are kind of a nerdy person, curious about lots of different things, football is not going to use 100% of your brain. And so once you're done with your responsibilities, you've got a ton of time. And I actually started getting into software development and building things for people during the off seasons of football. And so when I retired, again, retired is a very gracious way to say that no one wanted me to be on their team. When I retired, I put a resume together, and it was a Stanford degree, about 12 or so like web development projects, and I played football for 4 years. And so I was just sending it out to people, and they thought it was a joke. A lot of people thought it was a joke resume, like, okay, yeah, whatever, dude, you played football, and now you want to work for a company. And so one of those people called me and to like figure out like, hey, is this for real? And it was. And I started working there. I worked there for a long time, but I was interested in building companies. And really what happened is I was at a startup. It was a later stage startup. Things were going well. And we got acquired by private equity, and things started to change in dramatic ways that sort of like opened my eyes to a new world. And all of a sudden there are new people making decisions and saying, we're going to do things this way now. And it's like, to be honest with you, my thought was at that time was like, I want to build companies, but like, how do you build companies from that seat? And instead of this seat, not that, I mean, the people who are building things are the backbone of all of this, right? People who are entrepreneurs, they're the ones who are doing the real work. But that part of it was something I hadn't thought about before. And, being an unsuccessful entrepreneur just sort of like drove more of my curiosity into how you can help a lot of businesses to succeed. I think I don't have the attention span, in a sense, to be an entrepreneur in one specific area, because I have a lot of broad interest. And so that was that, and some really key mentorship, even from some people on this call, I think really drove me into venture.
That makes a lot of sense. I feel like that ability and desire to build companies is something that good VCs typically have, because to be a good VC, you really have to understand how a company is built. I invested in many later stage companies, some of the biggest companies in the world that were already multi-billion-dollar companies. That's a very different skill set than building a company. And now, having spent 2 years building this fund, I'm not only an investor, but I'm also an entrepreneur, right? So I've gone through the same hard lessons that all founders have, which is start from scratch, and how do you build this thing with a value of 0, and really nobody doing it except you, and just build it brick by brick. So that's been a great experience. I think it also gives me a lot of insight into companies as well, that somebody who hasn't founded a business wouldn't really have. So I think it makes me a better investor all around. So Hunter, how did you get into VC, and what do you think about what other guys have said?
Yeah, I mentioned in my background bio at the outset that I finished business school at Northwestern in the winter quarter of 2010, so March, and then played my last football game 9 months later, and actually was still on the Bears roster until I think around the summer of the next season. And so you sort of have this like built-in purgatory where if you take another job, then you're relinquishing your paycheck. And so it gives a lot of NFL players this natural beat to kind of be mindful about what they want to do next. And I think athletes, if they've been smart with their money, also have the benefit of not having to immediately go take a job just to keep a paycheck coming in. And so I took advantage of that time frame. I feel like a lot like the way Isaiah has described things, to just become a sponge. I'll bet I met with 90 people across the venture and private equity world just in Chicago. Everything from enormous buyout shops like Madison Dearborn and GTCR to boutique private equity firms that were buying 1 million EBITDA businesses to things more on the venture capital side. And those were interests that were cultivated a little bit at business school. My first 2 jobs were actually at a portfolio company and then working at a venture fund of an adjunct professor that had taught a class of mine on new business formation at Northwestern. And so I had always been kind of moving in that direction, even to a degree while I was playing, similar to what Isaiah and I know Kelvin have described, where I'd already kind of wet my beak a little bit with some angel investing and had some wins, but also had a couple, I think it was important to have also realized that it didn't always work out, and also had some that didn't turn out exactly how I wanted them to. So of the last decade, I've probably spent 6 of those years on the operating side. Most recently at a company called Striver, where I was employee 11 of a company that's now, I think, north of 200 employees. And so to be there basically on the ground floor, I got there like a year after the company was founded, to see it transition into a pretty large enterprise learning platform was a fantastic ride, and I think has made me a better investor along the way as well. And then on the next play side, despite the fact that I am the least tenured of the 4 partners on Next Play's team, I've known Ryan, who founded Next Play, for 16 or 17 years, dating all the way back to when we served on the board of the NFLPA together. And so you'll see that as a common thread from a lot of the panelists here. That Players Association leadership role is usually kind of like teammates will elect their nerdiest fellow guy in the locker room because they think they'll make the best decisions in our negotiations with ownership and the other things that the PA does. And so we've all had that in common, in the sense that we've had a lot of other things going on besides just studying playbooks during our NFL careers.
That's really helpful. I hope that some of the allocators, LPs, and potential investors that are listening reach out to all of you guys afterwards, because it'd be wise to do so.
Let me make one comment. When I played, I'm about a decade before everyone, so I was chosen because they knew management wouldn't fire me, because we were just after the strike, and 80.
Courtney, it looks like you froze again. So while I'm not sure what's going on with your connection with Zoom, but let's
My wife's a federal judge. I can't kick her off, so that's what's going on.
So you're back. So it was, finish the story. I think this was good. I think this is good.
Yeah, hopefully I'll stay on. Yeah, my wife's a federal judge, and so literally I can't kick her off. She would throw me in jail. No, I wasn't the smartest guy on my team. I was just the guy that I was a starter, and we had just come through the NFL strike where they fired player representatives. So my teammates figured that if we name a starter to the player rep,
Just to give you some clarity on maybe where Courtney is going, if you were voted as a rep, most times, if you're a starter, you're not going to get cut and you're not going to get fired. So I think that's where he was going with, him, taking over that, taking over that union role, there right after the strike in the mid '80s.
Job insurance is always good to have, right? in whatever form it takes. So we're coming up on the hour, and we've got 30 more minutes left. So folks that are falling off because the hour is over, you're going to miss all the stuff on investing. So maybe you'll catch it on a replay.